Of all Germany's aces, few can boast of belonging in the same class as the legendary Adolf Galland. His more than 100 victories against Western opponents are a testament to his bravery and skill as a pilot. However, his place in aviation history was earned with more than just the victory bars on the tail of his Me-109.
It was publicized that Red had an accident by testing a new weapon. Yes, he tested a new weapon, but it was his pistol.
A general by the age of 29, he established himself as a leader through successful operations like the Channel Dash and through his willingness to take on the German leadership by championing the causes closest to him, his beloved fighter force and the German population, suffering the punishment of the Allied bombing raids. After the war, Galland would eventually return to his hometown of Remagen-Oberwinter, situated just south of Bonn and next to the Rhine River. In the early 1990s, Galland invited a camera crew into his home to discuss his personal recollections of World War II in a videotaped interview. Of all his missions, perhaps the one which best illustrates his bravado as a fighter ace occurred during an impromptu Spitfire battle on his way to deliver, of all things, a lobster dinner.
The picture you have with the two 109s, and I noticed they had an extra little addition to your plane, a basket of lobsters or something behind the armor plate. What is the story about that?
The story behind this is, in this time, our fighter commander, higher fighter commander, was in Le Touquet, General Osterkamp, World War I is. And he had birthday. And I decided to fly up with a number 2 in a 109, and I bought lobsters and oysters, which were very famous in Brest. Put them in a
basket of something.
A basket with some ice. I did not put champagne in it. Many times in newspapers you can read had lobster and champagne. Champagne would have exploded in altitude because we did not have
pressurization.
Delivering the birthday gift, Galland and his wingman Westphal took a detour over England so that the German ace might get in some shooting practice in his brand new Me-109. It was there that the duo encountered a formation of over 30 British aircraft on a training mission.
We were very fortunate this time because the English did believe they were between their own, there were no enemies in the air, and there were some Spitfires on training flights. They were playing around, some were making acrobatics. And I could manage to shoot down 3 of these poor planes. Which they never believed they were in combat before they were shot down.
Flying in a new 109 with a modified cockpit configuration, Galland inadvertently lowered his landing gear in the middle of battle.
There was a new Mach, and the installation in the cockpit was a little bit different. And in the last combat, I hit with my knee the bottom for the undercarriage. And the undercarriage came out. And I did not realize this. So I had to escape because I was followed by some Spitfires which were not in agreement with me. Since I had realized I did some damage to them, they were following me, and I had the undercarriage out with full power down to sea level and then to Le Touquet. And in Le Touquet, I did not realize I had the undercarriage out. I pushed the button, the undercarriage went in. I turned around, and they were firing signals. I thought, what is going on there?
Big birthday party.
because they didn't make around, had always the wrong decision made. When I was in the final approach, the undercarriage I took in, and when I had to go around, I put it out again. So finally, they came and showed me a tire. I said, something's going on with your undercarriage. Then I made it correctly.
Oh, good.
So I could offer Osterkamp the lobsters and
The oysters. And 3 Spitfires.
And 3 Spitfires.
Wonderful.
All in all, Galland would tally up 100 kills, including 31 Hurricanes and 47 Spitfires on his more than 400 missions. Though impressive when compared with the top British and American aces hovering at or near 40 victories, his totals might seem modest, considering some German pilots had more than 300 kills. The great discrepancy in totals begs the question, how were the Luftwaffe pilots racking up so many more victories?
There's a very good reason for this, because we had a complete different system to use our pilots. Germany was a poor people. Military-wise, we were very, very poor. We didn't have the aircraft, we did not have the pilot schools, we did not have the teachers, we did not have the fuel later on. So we were always very short in replacements. Mechanical replacement and personal replacement. And we had to use our pilots from the first day up to the last, or up to the day they could still even fly. The Americans, and I think in some way also the English, they had a system where they got points.
Yes, that's right. A certain number of missions or a certain number of hours,
Yeah.
then you went back to some other non-combat job for a while and then possibly came back to combat later.
Yeah. In Germany, we have many pilots which have more than 1,000 military missions, war missions. More than 1,000. It's unbelievable. I personally have 400 or something like this. It's not very much. And when you were fighting this time, you were, of course, an expert in fights. Also, but I remember that everywhere, in all fronts, even over Germany, we had such an amount of enemy aircraft in the air all the time. It was unbelievable.
Galland's many victories would bring him countless awards and honours. He became a favourite of Hitler's and a poster boy for the Luftwaffe. On one occasion, Hitler went so far as to censor a portrait of Galland to keep the ACES image untarnished.
Adolfo, this excellent portrait you have here, would you tell us something about it?
Yes, of course. The story behind is as following. In my wing, 26, Schlaggater, was based in Düsseldorf, the wing. And Düsseldorf is known as town with portrait artists. The best we had in Germany were housed in Düsseldorf. So in the beginning of the war, the year 1940, during the Battle of Britain, the town of Düsseldorf has ordered this portrait by an artist with the name Pöten, Leo Pöten. Very nice, sympathetic, and capable man. And he made this portrait. I told him I will not stand there for hours. So I had my best man, who had the same figure, put him my uniform on, and he was sitting there instead of me. I have only sat for 2 hours or so. And then there was an art exposition in Munich, in the German Museum, And when Hitler saw this portrait, he said, very nice, but no way to show it like it is. This man should be an example for our youngsters, and he is smoking a cigar. Impossible. So that was his critique on it. And the town Düsseldorf has ordered immediately a new portrait of mine.
Did they ever consider just painting out the cigar instead of
No,
doing another
they immediately have ordered a new portrait
full
from
portrait.
the same artist. After the war, I was informed by somebody who came from the town of Düsseldorf that the two portraits in stock, and I could get them, but I should pay a little amount, not as much as they have paid for it. So for 100 marks, I got each of the two portraits, and they are now in my house.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Some of Galland's greatest victories came in the Battle of Britain, where he shot down 33 aircraft and took the lead amongst all ACES. The Battle of Britain was in a way a changing of the guard for the Luftwaffe. It saw Goering promote two of his aces, Galland and Werner Mulders, to the position of wing commander, in the hopes of instilling the fighter force with a modern perspective on air-to-air combat.
In the beginning of the Battle of Britain, Goering has changed this. He understood that the elder generation, which were at this time, we were 25, 26 years old, and they were 15 years older, and they were the commanders. Goering understood that this was wrong. So Mulders and myself, we were the first younger wing commanders of the younger generation. Mulders did like it very, very much. He wanted to be the forthcoming Bölke. He told me once, you can be the next Richthofen by shooting down only with your stupid head. I wanted to be a Bölke, the thinker, the tactician.
Tactician.
Mulders would live his dream of becoming a grand tactician of the air. With his help, the modern finger four formation was adopted by the Luftwaffe. Up until then, the German fighters largely used the limited, close formation style popular in World War I.
We started with the four-finger
Yes.
open formation. We learned this in Spain. And this was the merit of Mulders, who has invented this. In a close formation, only the leader can see. All the other people, all the other pilots are completely occupied by holding their position, their close position. It was stupid.
Though led by prolific aces like Mulders and Galland in the Battle of Britain, the Luftwaffe pilots were still handicapped by the German architects of the invasion. The planners sent their pilots to war in aircraft with barely enough range to reach their British foes.
In the Battle of Britain itself, though, you couldn't go very deep into England because of the lack of range of the Messerschmitts. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. We had 1 hour flight time, and we could reach just London and stay over London for about 5 minutes or 7 minutes, and then we had to turn back because we had to take altitude. And the incursion we made were mostly about around 20,000 feet.
When the Luftwaffe fighters did cross the Channel with what little fuel they had in reserve, the dense English radar system ensured they would be greeted with a hostile welcome.
When we took off in this area where the fighter places, we were immediately detected by the English radar. And our radar was just in the beginning, it was neglected. We did not have a very good radar system. But we learned very soon that the English radar system was just perfect. And nevertheless, we neglected to attack the system and to destroy the system. We have only made, I think, 2 attacks on the English radar. This was one of the mistakes. The radar organization was around here. They had different sectors. And this organization was extremely good. Thank you.
Perhaps the greatest challenges to the Luftwaffe during the Battle of Britain were the RAF pilots themselves, who were determined to repel the invaders and preserve their homeland.
How did you feel about the British as opponents in the war, the RAF?
They were very serious opponents. We know this. Mm-hmm. And at this time, the English fighter pilots were I would say, the best fighter pilots. They were equal with our own. And their spirit to fight was very, very high. So we had the highest respect.
If you knew who you were, who was up there against you, did you think, oh, I've got Barter out there right now? Was it like that? Did you actually say to yourself at that moment, there is a man out there I know by name and I want to get him?
No, we couldn't. We couldn't determine it in the air who was sitting in the plane. Never. And we had all our victory bars on the tail. This would not be recognizable in the air. Absolutely not.
After a string of resounding victories in mainland Europe, the Luftwaffe found themselves in a new and vulnerable position in the Battle of Britain. Though they faced logistical problems and stiff opposition, it did not deaden the spirit of the German fighter force.
I would say the morale at this time on both sides was extremely high. Extremely high. We wanted to fight them, they wanted to fight us. There was no any opportunity to escape the fight, and there was nobody who wanted to escape.
Hermann Goering had promoted Galland to the position of wing commander, but this did not stop the young ace from publicly sparring with his superior about the deficiencies of the Luftwaffe. Galland recalled a tense dispute when Goering blamed the fighters for failing to sacrifice themselves to save his more costly bombers.
Our bombers and Goering himself, they have ordered us to stay with the bombers at the same altitude, at the same speed, and as close as possible. I said they wanted to have a little German fighter hanging on their wing. This could not be done by us because we were far below our cruising speed. The bombers were slow in formation. They had a lot of bombs hanging outside. This has lowered their speed also. And in addition, they were trying to go higher than their best altitude because of the English anti-aircraft. And the 109, with their high wing load, they needed speed. And the Spitfire, with lower wing load, could even slow down more. When I explained this to Goering, he came once to the channel. In this area there was a tunnel. He came with a special train, and he ordered Mölders and myself to come. And he came out of his train, and in front of the train he blamed us for half an hour for not performing the escort. And I told him, when we slow down to the bomber speed, then we are only targets for the English fighters. We cannot maneuver. And Goering said, when you will be shot down, this is better than my expensive bombers were shot down. When he said this, I was annoyed, terribly.
I'm not surprised.
And finally Goering, after 40 minutes blaming, he asked Möllers, what can I do for your wing to improve the fighting capability, especially for escort? Möllers answered, I wanted to have the more powerful engines, the same engine with a higher compression.
Compression ratio, yes.
And Goering said to his aide, take a note, he will get this engine first. Then he asked me, and I was still annoyed. And I said, I looked at him, that's a fat man in front of me. I said, please, Herr Reichsmarschall, equip my wing with Spitfires. Boom.
Was that the start of the deterioration?
That was the story. He did not expect this. He couldn't say a word. He was standing there for a minute, and then he turned around and stamped back to his train. So I was expecting punishment, but I didn't get it.
Didn't get the Spitfire?
I didn't get the Spitfires.
No Spitfires either.
Soon the Luftwaffe turned their attention from Britain to the Eastern Front as Hitler initiated Operation Barbarossa. In history's most massive military operation, 4.5 million German and Axis troops, over 4,000 tanks and 4,000 aircraft invaded the Soviet Union along a 2,900-kilometer border. Early on, the Luftwaffe fighters ballooned their totals as they feasted on the less experienced Russian fighters.
The revolution in victories came up, I call it the revolution. It was when the Russians front were opened. There was such a terrible amount of aircraft they were bringing into the air. Unexperienced pilots also, very, very unexperienced. And inflation, well, it was an inflation on the numbers. Inflation on victories when we started the Russian war. And from then on, the numbers were going up. Many people reached 100 and more victories. But this didn't change the situation.
I think only you and Marseille had more than 100 in the Western Front only, didn't you?
Oh, there are a few more.
A few more?
Few more.
I know those two of the, you two of them.
But the big numbers were, of course,
all in the Russian front.
All in the Russian front. The Russians have improved later on, technically and tactically, and in experience also. Mm-hmm. They gained. They made up the difference. But it was still easier to shoot down a Russian plane instead of an American or English plane.
As Luftwaffe aces racked up greater and greater total victories, it became necessary to adjust the point system for coveted awards, like the Knight's Cross.
In the beginning, 20 victories in the West were compared with the Iron Cross. Later on, 50. My brother did have 57 when he was awarded with the Knight's Cross.
There were doubts and suspicions amongst the members of Allied air forces that the Germans were embellishing their totals. Galland quickly discounted any of these rumors.
Some people believe the Americans. American fighters, which were here in our meeting, our annual meeting, they put this question. They did believe we were counting 3 or 4 victories for an American 4-engine bomber shot down. That is absolutely wrong. A victory is a victory, but for the awards, the value of a victory was different. A Russian fighter plane, single-engine fighter plane, was one victory for the decoration, but to be compared with the American 4-engine bomber shot down out of a bomber formation, this was a value of 3 or 4 later.
That must be how that rumor got started.
Yeah,
it was not victories they were counting, they were just counting points toward awards. And that makes good sense because it's much more daring to difficult to go in a
much
big,
more dangerous.
much more dangerous to go in a formation like that.
Though Barbarossa was initially a success and the Soviet Air Force was quickly devoured by the Germans, one of the Luftwaffe leaders, Ernst Udet, fell under the pressures of his daunting assignment.
And it was publicized that Udet had an accident by testing a new weapon. Yes, he tested a new weapon, but it was his pistol. But we knew when the funeral took place, we knew already. Goering had told us what has gone on.
November the 22nd, 1941, the day of Udet's funeral, was doubly tragic for the Luftwaffe and for Galland. Werner Mulders, the young ace who had quickly risen up the ranks side by side with Galland, died in a tragic plane accident.
He was ordered to come to the state funeral of Udet, but he couldn't make it on behalf of bad weather. And then he got the message he should stay there. He was on the Crimea. And he did a lot of shooting and hunting there.
Then he got, was he killed in an accident or?
No, yeah, coming. And he came in a 111, in a Heinkel bomber, which were going home for the general overhaul. And it was bad weather, and Mulders was flying as passenger. He was not in the cockpit. He was behind the crew. And they had to they lost their engine, and they were flying for an hour with one engine, and then they had to make a forced landing in Breslau, in Silesia. And this landing, the pilot, who was an experienced pilot from the Spanish Civil War already, he overshot the runway on a small field, and when he took off, he
rolled over.
He came down.
Shortly before his death, Mulders was promoted to Inspector General of the fighters. Galland feared he might be next in line for this position, as it would take him out of the air and away from his beloved squadron. His fears became a reality when Goering forced the promotion onto him at Mulders' funeral.
This series of photos were taken at my wing headquarters by the end of 41, when I was made General of Fighter Arms. Goering came on and delivered a speech.
That's a good shot.
He is delivering his speech. By the way, I can tell you, when you see the flag, this was the flag of the forces. It has nothing to do with the party.
Oh, it's a military flag.
It's a military flag.
Yes, it's not a political flag at all.
The German soldier, professional soldier, was not allowed to vote.
Oh.
It was not allowed to be voted, to be selected.
Oh, just totally out of politics.
Out of politics.
You took over as General of Fighters. You were only 29, I believe, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a tremendous responsibility for such a young man to take over the entire Luftwaffe fighter command.
As you know, Mulders was the first one. And at the funeral of Mulders, on his open grave, Goering did promote me to fighter general. I didn't like this, first this location, and secondly, I didn't like to be put under such responsibility. I wanted to keep going on as wing commander. I was very happy with this mission. but there was no question to avoid this. You are the fighter general from now on.
Did you have responsibility for both day fighters and night fighters?
In the beginning, not.
No.
In the beginning, only for day fighters, and I can tell you this was enough. It was really enough.
I'm sure.
We had so many problems with personnel, with the losses we had, with the wounded people, the replacement of military leaders, fighter leaders, wing commanders, group commanders, squadron leaders. It was enormous.
As a kind of consolation for his promotion, Hitler awarded Galland with the jewels to the Knight's Cross. Mulders, the only other recipient, had received this highest of honours after 100 victories. Though Galland had only 94 kills, Hitler did not want him denied this award as a result of taking a bureaucratic position. Galland recalls how both Goering and Hitler, though running a war on two fronts, were preoccupied with the cut and size of his diamonds.
When I was wearing this first time, Goering saw it. It was in his special train on a trip to the Ukraine, to his headquarters there. He asked me, tell me, is this the highest decoration the Führer gave you, the diamonds? To the Knight's Cross? I said, yes. It can't be. Take it off. I took it off. I had it fixed with some
Ribbon or
strips from the girls. And I gave it to him, and he said, this is impossible. You know what these are. These are not diamonds. These are only splinters, poor splinters. And this cannot be awarded as highest German decoration. It's impossible. I must talk to Hitler about it. And give it to me. I will let you make for my jeweler in Berlin a new set. I have some stock of diamonds there, good diamonds, and you can see what the difference is. Some weeks later, I was ordered to see Goering in his house near Berlin, and he said, "Now I can give you the diamonds like I call diamonds." And he showed me this in one hand, his edition, in the other hand, Hitler's first edition. I said, "Can you see the difference?" I said, "Yes, I can see it." He put it against the light like so. Then he must have talked to Hitler, because some weeks later I was ordered to see Hitler in his headquarters. And Hitler said, "Finally, my dear Galland, I am in a position to award you now with the highest German decoration. What you are wearing up to now is only an interim solution. Can you take it off?" And I had, not knowing what was going on, I had the Goering set on. He took the Goering set in one hand, his new set in the other hand, put it to the light and said, "Can you see the difference? These are splinters," the Goering one. And they were far bigger. But he didn't realize this. Goering said, "This is typical for Hitler, because he knows any caliber of any battleship to the German fleet and the English fleet. He knows every caliber and every trajectory, but about diamonds, he has no understanding at all."
Now General of the Fighters, Galland was in an almost purely advisory bureaucratic position. He was, however, on rare occasions, asked to take command of specific operations. In February of 1942, Hitler charged him with overseeing the escort responsibilities of one of the boldest naval maneuvers of World War II.
This is the story of Hans-Joachim Marseille, one of the most renowned fighter pilots in history. The remarkable accomplishments of German pilots during World War II sharply contrasted with the inept leadership of their Luftwaffe commanders, particularly Hermann Goering. Exceptional pilots were active in every theatre of the war, including the African campaign. Alongside the incredible achievements of Hans-Joachim Marseille, known as the Star of Africa, we must also recognise the quiet heroism of many of his comrades. The German fighter pilot was a noble soldier who fulfilled his duty with courage, embodying the finest aspects of military tradition. Franz Els, a retired ambassador, was formerly a pilot with Fighter Squadron 27. This is the memory of a time which, to a great extent, shaped my youth, and which has also greatly influenced my whole way of thinking since then, to the point where I would do anything and everything to avoid a future war and to prevent the sort of suffering we endured in the desert, sometimes under extremely hard climactic and general living conditions. The battle under the scorching sun of Africa was a strategically crucial aspect of aerial warfare. Disrupting enemy troop movements and destroying their supply routes were the primary objectives of the aerial strategy. To achieve this successfully, gaining aerial supremacy in the African theatre of war was essential for both sides. In numerous engagements, the fighters primarily shouldered the main burden of the air battles over the desert. Beating their wings, our fighters returned from their successful encounter. Hauptmann Uben, holder of the Knight's Cross with Bar. Up till now, he has shot down 101. Major Munchberg, who has the Knight's Cross with Swords, has killed 4 British in this air battle alone. Up till now, he has shot down a total of 125 planes. Feldmarschall Kesselring. In the centre, Hauptmann Bar. He was able to shoot down 5 Tommies today and has been the victor in 152 air battles. The burning wrecks of the planes lie over a wide area of the desert. In this battle of man against man, a remarkable spirit of chivalry emerged, rooted in comradeship and respect for enemy pilots. There were no terror attacks on cities, nor were defenseless civilians strafed by the fighters. The focus was solely on engaging military targets. Against the RAF Spitfire, Hurricane, Curtiss Tomahawk, and from 1942 onward, the improved Kitty Hawk, the Luftwaffe deployed its most powerful fighter, the Me-109, while the Italians used a Fiat CR-42. Amid these clashes, a young German fighter pilot soared across the African sky like a comet, setting new, unsurpassed standards in aerial warfare. On April 22, 1941, 22-year-old Hans-Joachim Marseille was transferred to North Africa with the 1st Group Fighter Squadron 27 to support the Afrika Korps. The very next day, April 23rd, he won his first air battle in Africa by shooting down a Hurricane. Thus began the most remarkable series of successes in the history of fighter pilots. The brilliant aeronautical skills of this young pilot officer enabled him to break all previous records and set new ones that remain unmatched even today. Adolf Galland, Chief of Staff of the fighters, visits an airstrip in the desert. A signpost in the desert. the Staffelkapitan's tent. Back from a successful hunt. In this action, the squadron gained its 1000th air victory. The victorious fighter pilot is fated. Oberstleutnant Marseille, who has the oak leaves, has shot down 87 of the enemy so far. One of the most outstanding fighter pilots in North Africa, Hans Arnold Stahl-Schmidt, a close friend of Marseille, wrote home in a forces letter, "Marseille can shoot like a young god." Above all, he can do what only a few can do, and that is to shoot confidently in a curve. Friedrich Körner, pilot with Fighter Squadron 27. Hans-Joachim Marseille was probably one of the very few fighter pilots who mastered 100% the art of shooting in a curve. Most of the planes Hans-Joachim Marseille brought down, almost 100%, were shot in a curve. It's a special technique and a special tactic which you really have to master if you want to succeed. Emil Kladd, also a pilot with Fighter Squadron 27. Marseille combined many qualities which are important in a fighter pilot. Firstly, he had very good sight, and in the air, three-dimensional vision is very important. You need to be able to look into the depths of space in order to recognize the enemy as soon as possible. Then you have a decisive advantage. You can position yourself in the most favorable place for an attack, and maybe you can even carry out a surprise attack, which puts you at a great advantage. Secondly, Marseille developed his own special tactics for shooting down a plane, which differed significantly from the methods of most of the other fighter pilots. When we attacked, we always attached great importance to flying at high speed, so that we could escape from a precarious situation if necessary. Of course, Marseille too flew at high speed. But besides that, he did something extraordinary. In Africa, it frequently happened that the enemy formed a defense circle. That means when 5, 6 or 7 planes fly in a circle, the one behind could cover the one in front. So there was practically no one without cover. Marseille flew into this defensive circle. And in fact, nobody else ever copied this tactic, because when he entered from on top, he only had a very short time to shoot. But many times he dived through and attacked the defensive circle from below, and by using this tactic, he had to fly very slowly. He even took it to the point where he had to operate his landing flaps so as not to fall down, because of course he had to fly his curve more tightly than the upper defense circle. Shooting in a curve is the most difficult thing a fighter pilot can do. That means that the enemy flies a defense circle. It means they're already lying in a curve, and the attacking fighter has to fly into this defense circle. By pulling his plane right round, his curve radius must be smaller, but if he does that, his target disappears, in most cases, below his wings. So he can't see it anymore and has to proceed simply by instinct. He already has to shoot without being able to see the target. You have to calculate this interval between your own fire and the presumed hit of the bullets on the enemy plane. You have to guess, to sense it, and of course, to score a hit. Hans-Joachim Marseille was not only an excellent marksman, but also an outstanding pilot. He embodied the most important characteristics of the ideal fighter pilot. Whenever the Gelb 14 appeared in the African sky, it signalled significant losses for his British adversaries. This is evident from the following chronological list of his air victories. 23rd of April 1941, first shooting down in Africa, Hurricane at Tobruk. 17th of June 1941, 2 Hurricanes shot down, 5 more shot down by the 14th of September. 24th of September 1941, 4 air victories at Halfaya Pass. 14 Hurricanes shot down by the 17th of December 1941. 12th of February 1942, 4 shot down at Tobruk in 6 minutes. 21st of February 1942, 50th air victory. 25th of April 1942, 2 shot down in 2 minutes. 10th of May 1942, 2 Hurricanes shot down at Maturba in 2 minutes. 12 air victories by the 31st of May. 3rd of June 1942, 6 shot down in 11 minutes, 75th air victory. 10th of June 1942, 4 air victories at Burhakheim in 15 minutes. 15th of June 1942, 4 air victories in 5 minutes, including his 91st air victory. 16th of June 1942, 4 shot down. 17th of June 1942, 6 in 7 minutes over the airport Kermit. 1st of September 1942, 17 air victories in 3 actions. 2nd of September 1942, 5 air victories. 3rd of September 1942, 6 air victories. 5th of September 1942, 4 air victories. 6th of September 1942, 4 air victories. 7th of September 1942, 2 air victories. 11th of September 1942, 2 air victories. 15th of September 1942, 7 shot down in 11 minutes. 26th of September 1942, 7 air victories, including 6 Spitfires, 1 Curtiss, and his 158th air victory. He and his plane were one unit, and he was in command of that plane like nobody else. Fritz Keller, pilot with Fighter Squadron 27. Well, he didn't stand out that much in the France-England action. His great time started in Africa. He developed his own unique tactics, and he was lucky in having such good sight and such incredible speed of reaction. He was so familiar with the machine, and he controlled the machine like no one else. Edouard Edo Neumann, Marseille's wing leader. Marseille wasn't robust, he was the exact opposite, somehow gentle. His blood vessels shone through his skin, and I was always amazed by the strength he had when he flew in an air fight. You have to have a lot of strength to fly in curves and to pull the plane through. He always flew at very, very high speed. You could see the white eddies at the end of the wings. You recognize him immediately in flight. That's Marseille. He understood and reacted at the speed of lightning. He had an incredible eye. I want to say he seemed able to divide the air into slices. We others sometimes looked through the enemy and looked at the other side and didn't see what was in front of us. He was a talented pilot, extraordinarily talented, a unique talent. Jochen, as his friends called him, was highly decorated for his extraordinary achievements. He received the Iron Cross, second and first class, in September 1940. On November 3, 1941, he was awarded the Honor Goblet of the Luftwaffe. On December 1, 1941, after achieving 33 air victories, he became the first pilot in Africa to be awarded the German Cross in gold. On February 22, 1942, Adolf Hitler decorated him with the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross. On June 6, 1942, with 75 air victories, he became the 98th soldier of the Wehrmacht to receive the oak leaves to his Knight's Cross. Just 14 days later, on June 18th of the same year, he was again decorated by his Führer Adolf Hitler with the swords to his Knight's Cross and oak leaves. He was only the 12th soldier in the Wehrmacht to receive this honor. Only 2 months later, on August 6, 1942, Hans-Joachim Marseille received the highest Italian medal for bravery, the Medaglia d'Oro. And again, just 4 weeks later, on September 4, 1942, in addition to the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross with oak leaves and swords, he was awarded the Diamonds. This came after his 126th air victory, making him only the 4th member of the German Wehrmacht to be so honoured. The magnificent series of successes by Hans-Joachim Marseille, now known as the Star of Africa, swiftly turned him into a national hero all over Germany. To speak of Joachim solely as a phenomenally successful fighter pilot does not fully capture the essence of the man. He was born in Berlin, Charlottenburg, on December 13, 1919, into a family with a tradition of flying. His father, Siegfried Marseille, had already flown in World War I and later served as a major general in the army until he was killed in action on the Eastern Front. Young Marseille was fascinated by airplanes from a young age, and his flying training began on November 7, 1938. His easygoing nature led to clashes with the formality and discipline of military life. Marseille the individualist was soon reprimanded for unauthorized aerobatics and low-flying stunts. On September 6, 1940, he was transferred to the 1st Group of Fighter Squadron 2 in France. There, he caught the attention of his superiors, initially due to his youthful antics. He was an easygoing young NCO, enamored with life, opposed to all forms of discipline, and with a magnetic attraction to the opposite sex. During a few engagements on the Channel coast, Marseille achieved his first 7 air victories, all against Spitfires, but he himself was shot down 4 times, resulting in a less than impressive success rate. However, Eduard Neumann, who would later become his wing leader, recognized Marseille's extraordinary talent and knew how to guide the young eagle onto the right path. He didn't press Marseille, fully aware that the idea of teamwork held little sway over this young man. Thus, Edu Neumann became the pivotal figure behind the scenes, laying the groundwork for the Star of Africa. The 1st Group of Fighter Squadron 27 is cleared for takeoff. Enemy fighters are inbound. The Me-109s are started up. The pilots make their final preparations for takeoff. He was an exceptionally kind man, very friendly and solicitous, towards subordinates as well, towards the ordinary soldiers in the army. Whenever they needed help, he helped them. That was his most striking characteristic. Hans-Joachim Marseille was a young daredevil, and what was especially impressive was that with all the success he achieved, he remained a kind and friendly comrade. Like no other young soldier of the war generation, Hans-Joachim personified the symbol of German youth of his time with his generous and friendly demeanour. Joachim, who inspired both respect and affection in his comrades, likely captured everyone's heart due to his unorthodox behaviour. I couldn't imagine a better relationship between superior and subordinate. I never had any discipline difficulties with Marseille. I couldn't imagine a better relationship between superior and subordinate. I never had any discipline difficulties with Marseille. He behaved in a very orderly fashion. a very military way, and he never drew attention to the fact that he was the famous Eagle. So, whenever I had problems which bothered me, I took the car and drove over to Marseille's tent. There was a sofa made out of sandbags, filled with sand and covered with horse blankets.
Ein Sofa gab es aus Sandsäcken gefüllt mit Sand und abgedeckt mit Pferdedecken.
So I used to sit down there and flip through the old newspapers, which I'd already read, and in this way I let the atmosphere of the Marseille squadron wash over me. As the war progressed, the enemy's material superiority constantly grew. Due to immense supply difficulties, the only way the Luftwaffe could respond was by increasing the number of sorties flown by their pilots. However, this continual pressure took its toll and gradually wore down the crews. On the afternoon of December 26, 1942, Joachim Marseille's Gelb 14 took off for the second time that day. Despite already destroying 3 Spitfires in the morning, he achieved another 3 air victories, once again against Spitfires. His 158th and final air victory was also his most challenging. The enemy pilot proved to be almost his equal. A tough struggle begins in the air. Every second counts in the decision of life or death. Finally, in a moment of inattention on the part of his adversary, Joachim Marseille manages to maneuver behind the enemy. Under the burst of fire from the Gelb 14, the 158th enemy plane plummets from the sky. But this time, as he approaches to land at the squadron airfield, there's no triumphant beat of his wings. Pale, his face pallid and drawn, he climbs out of his plane and with trembling hands reaches for a cigarette. Acknowledging his masterly opponent at the subsequent flight meeting, Marseille pays tribute to the skill of his adversary. Marseille was a legend for all of us, Germans and Italians alike. He was so successful. And we were grateful for somebody like Marseille, who was able somehow to lift some of the pressure which the flying exercised on us.
Im Falle Marseille zum Beispiel, indem den Druck minderte, der aus der Luft ausgeübt worden war.
You see, the material superiority of the enemy was so enormous at that time.
Unwahrscheinlich stark, ne? Also schon allein aus Dankbarkeit, nicht, war das Verhältnis also gut.
It's the 30th of September 1942. The desert is bathed in an eerie, pale light as the fateful day begins to dawn. Once again, as he's done on countless times in the past weeks and months, Joachim Marseille steps out onto the runway. At 10:47 he takes off with 8 other planes of his squadron to escort a Stuka unit. From the squadron command post, wing leader Neumann directs the squadron via radio towards a British fighter unit. As the German Messerschmitt fighters approach, the enemy veers northward, avoiding an air fight. The German fighters are already en route back when, at 11:30, news of an engine on fire reaches Major Neumann. I was at the command post myself and listening to the radio communication between the pilots of the No. 3 Squadron. I realized immediately that something serious had happened. I knew while they were still in flight that they were trying to bring Marseille over the lines into our territory while his plane was emitting a lot of smoke. And when it finally got to the point where they told him, "All right, you can get out now," he presumably turned the plane over onto its back, but with the engine at a sharp downward inclination. As he got out, he fell against the tail unit, and the whole of his groin area on one side was torn open.
Die ganze Leistenpartie wurde auf der einen Seite sehr stark aufgeschlagen Wir haben immer vermutet,
We always assumed that this was what caused his death, or if not, that he was unconscious and not even able to make an attempt to open his parachute.
dass gar nicht den Versuch machte, den Fallschirm zu ziehen.
At the time of the first announcement of the engine on fire, the first squadron was flying in formation at an altitude of approximately 3,000 meters. The flying time to their own lines was still approximately 5 minutes, covering about 40 kilometers, when a pall of white smoke from the engine port of Marseille's plane began to intensify. At 11:35 am, the unit flies over Sidi Abel Rahman and thus reaches the German lines. Joachim Marseille's question over the radio, "Are we already over our own lines? I can't see anything," clearly indicates that he'd already lost visibility due to the blanket of smoke surrounding him. Now the flames from the engine also become visible. After Marseille had thrown off the cockpit roof, he turned the plane onto its back with a half roll and prepared to bail out. After losing an altitude of about 2,000 to 3,000 meters, he unfastened his seatbelt. Due to poor visibility, he may not have realized that the Me-109 had already transitioned from an inverted position into a nosedive. Therefore, it's possible that he was struck by the tail unit when he exited the plane on the left-hand side, rendering him unconscious. Unable to pull the release to open the parachute, he was left helpless. In shock and disbelief, his comrades watched the tragedy unfold from their planes. Then, at 11:36, a broken voice came over the radio. "He's dead." Morale was so low that we needed a personality, someone like Oberstleutnant Franziskert, and it was he, incidentally, who recovered the body from the desert.
Hat ihn übrigens den Leichnam mit Fritz Dettmann gebracht aus der Wüste. Fuhr mal am Abend.
In the evening, he drove into the camp and gave the order to play the Rumba Assault record. It was Marseille's favorite record.
War die Lieblingsplatte von Marseille. Ne? Und das war psychologisch richtig, was der Franziska da gemacht hat.
Psychologically speaking, he did the right thing. You pulled yourself together, you covered up your worries and your anger and your fear.
Und man ist ja jung und hoffnungsfreudig. Also man wird
You were young after all, and you could handle the problem. But there was no getting away from the fact that Marseille was the last great eagle of the squadron that was utterly exhausted and really in no condition to put in more service on the front.
überhaupt schon eigentlich also gar nicht mehr frontverwendungsfähig waren. Nicht?
An inquiry was promptly initiated to investigate the cause of the crash and reached the following conclusions. Damage to the differential gear on the brand new Me-109 resulted in oil leakage. Subsequently, due to some teeth breaking off the spur wheel, the leaked oil ignited. The nearly vertical descent from an altitude of almost 3,000 meters led to the complete destruction of the engine. The report submitted by the Commission under reference 52, number 27042, concluded with the statement that sabotage or human error was ruled out.
Es gab eine Beerdigung auf dem Friedhof in Derna, eine sehr
The burial service took place in the cemetery at Derna, a dignified but at the same time simple affair under the conditions of war. Feldmarschall Kessering spoke first, and then it was my turn.
einfach. Es sprach aber selbst der Feldmarschall Kessering, nach ihm habe ich gesprochen.
The simple inscription on the gravestone reads, Hauptmann Hans-Joachim Marseille, born on December 13th, 1919, killed on September 30th, 1942, at southern city Abel Rahman, number 1 group of the Fighter Squadron 27. Matthias von Transvaal, Marseille's Batman and close friend, laid a chain of 158 muscle shells, one for each air victory, on the coffin. The final resting place for the Star of Africa was the memorial grave at Tobruk, where he was later reburied. 10 Italian soldiers from a pioneer unit, along with a few German comrades, erected a memorial pyramid on the crash site with the inscription, "Here died Hauptmann Hans-Joachim Marseille, undefeated." Due to war shortages, the building materials used in the construction of the pyramid were of poor quality. Bit by bit, pieces broke off until it finally crumbled and fell down. 47 years later, the new Marseille Pyramid was inaugurated on the same site by his former comrades from Fighter Squadron 27 and their Italian comrades. In 3 languages, German, Italian and Arabic, it tells the visitor, "Here died undefeated Hans-Joachim Marseille, September 30th, 1942. At the 49th commemoration, Anton Weiler spoke. "The fact that we're here today to consecrate this rebuilt pyramid is thanks to Edu Neumann. He gave utterance to the thought many years ago, and he showed an exemplary commitment and a passionate enthusiasm for this plan. He's undoubtedly the one here in this assembled circle who most deserves to be filled with pleasure, satisfaction and pride that the work is now complete." He gave his thoughts and plans unselfishly to the community of fighter pilots because he wanted this memorial to be rebuilt, to stand as well for all who did their duty in this theatre of war, in the loneliness of the desert and under the difficult climatic conditions. As we come together here, far away from our native country, to remember Hans-Joachim Marseille and all those who lost their lives, pilots and ground staff, it's important to state that this has nothing to do with hero worship. What we're feeling at this moment is nothing more than a part realization of a promise, which we made at that time, not to forget those killed or missing in the war. Nevertheless, this memorial also makes us conscious of the fact that it is our duty to remark that the German soldier did his duty with honor and courage. And in this sense, I feel at this moment an inner empathy. For me, this time, this hour, is a symbol of our human culture, which we cherished and which was and always will be the center of our community. And now I think we should remember with a minute's silence the ones who lost their lives here.
Und ich würde meinen, wir sollten in einer Denkminute uns jetzt an jene erinnern, die hier ihr Leben gelassen haben.
When Richthofen was killed in World War I, they said, the front stopped breathing. And this is what you had to say too after the death of Hans-Joachim Marseille. It touched us all very deeply, incredibly deeply, no matter whether we were Army or Navy, Italian or German.
Italiener, Deutscher nicht, hat uns alle gleichermaßen seelisch unwahrscheinlich bewegt, tief bewegt.
Order of the Day, September the 30th, 1942. On September the 30th, 1942, Hauptmann Marseille met his end as a pilot, undefeated by the enemy. We are at a loss to comprehend that this young, joyful and brave fighter pilot of our squadron is no longer amongst us. Our triumphs over our toughest adversary, the English, stand as unparalleled. We can find solace and pride in the fact that he was one of us. Words fail to capture the magnitude of this loss. It is our duty to carry on his legacy, both as individuals and as soldiers. His spirit will forever serve as a guiding light for the squadron.